Alrighty. Well, I'm gonna say we should get the party started. Hey, let's see what the.
Hello,
Hey, Chris. Hello.
how you doing?
I'm great. We're live. Just so you know, I just started it. I wanted to say first off, Happy Wine Wednesday to anybody joining. I was at church. I was running late. I had to go live because we missed last week. So apologies to anyone who has to watch this later because we're so late. Chris, your beautiful head. What happened? I love it.
It's a bit more. It's a bit more aerodynamic now.
Aerodynamic. What made you choose to do the style?
I recently lost a family member to cancer, and so I decided to shave it all off in support of family.
Well, how could I not have known that it would be such an impactful and interesting and truly meaningful reason? How awesome! I'm sorry to hear that, though. Man, I
That's
really,
okay.
I really do understand. I've been there, but still, I'm just. I think that's very cool. Sorry to hear it, but great reason. Should I shave my head too? I think I should.
No, don't. It gets cold.
It gets cold,
I
huh?
haven't got much left to shave.
What'd you say, Ray?
I haven't got much left to shave. It's too thin now.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry again to anyone. I told Chris before we started, I think in the comments, apologies for being so late. I was at church, the whole thing on the forehead. Chris doesn't like to do the church talk, so we won't. But I'm just sorry that I'm late. I apologize. I'm here now, ready to talk seahorses and apologies. I see Dan has joined us too. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, just as mean and ornery as ever.
Okay, well, I'm sure we have lots to catch up on. We haven't seen Chris in a while, so Chris, if you don't mind starting, what's up with you? What's going on with you?
Ah, so much. There's so much happening.
And
Lots of good things though.
I was
Lots
gonna
of good
say
things.
anything you can actually share.
Yeah. Um, we've got some new seahorses.
Ooh, what kind of new
Mm.
seahorses?
Hippocampus tuberculatus, which
Ooh.
is not a disease.
Can you
I
tell
mean,
us?
they might be contagious like a disease, but yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about this seahorse species? What are they compared to as far as Tell us what you want.
So they're a dwarf species of seahorse. They're a little dwarf species from Western Australia, um, and they're a subtropical species. They don't get very big. They're the ones that we have are probably maybe 2.5 inches long. Um, Absolutely tiny, absolutely adorable.
Okay, be quiet.
Um, and yeah, they're quite exciting. They're quite pretty when you look up really close enough to see all their intricate patterns
Mm.
and whatnot. Yeah, really, really tiny and really, really just gorgeous to watch.
Are they pretty much? I remember someone. I've never personally, I admit it, kept Zosterae or any of the dwarf species, any smaller species. I've always been a Rectus or Reedii or Cuda or the big guys. Um, with the smaller species like that, I've often heard that they are compared to it's hard to see them from across the room, but when you get close, they're like this sparkly, marvelous, like iridescent, like shining every direction kind of beauty. Is that how these
They
guys
do
are?
actually have they do actually have like a really, I guess, yeah, shiny or iridescent sort of saddle markings on them, especially on their backs, and yeah, they're absolutely gorgeous.
And have you been sharing any of the any pictures in groups yet, or is it too soon?
It's probably too soon.
Okay.
I'm waiting to try and see if we can breed them and raise them and all of that. But that's my intention to breed and raise them and get another species of seahorse available here in Australia and around the world
How
eventually.
awesome, you guys. And of course, it's here on Wine Wednesday first. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Chris, for sharing. But also, really quick, Dan, I can hear you have some questions. But my final question for you, Chris, is um, what happened to bring this new species into your facility? Is this you that did it, or did you have to?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got so many projects on the go always, but I've been hounding this certain collector to get me some of these guys for about 18 months now, and he finally came good and messaged me and he said, I've got a good number of these. Do you want them? And I said, yes, 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 dear God, yes. Yeah, it all happened quite quickly. And now we've got them at the facility and they're gorgeous and they're eating well and they're nice and healthy. And yeah, very, very hopeful for the future prospects.
That is so amazing, and we appreciate everything you do for us all over the world, and especially in Australia. We appreciate you. Dan, were you going to ask some stuff, or?
No, first, congrats on that, and sorry about the loss.
That is so
Um,
amazing, and we appreciate. Hey guys, does anyone have YouTube on? Ray, perchance?
they,
Thank you.
at one time, about 15 years ago, they were available in the U.S. market. I don't know if they were captive bred or if they were brought in as wild caught. Um, they weren't publicized very much. They're mostly coming into the public aquariums, but one of my friends was bringing them in from Australia.
Oh, no more.
Nice. So Dan, did you ever have any experience with them, perchance?
No, I never did. At the time, I was relatively new, and I was focused on. At that time, we were doing the Erectus, but I was focusing trying to get the reed-eye going. So, the reed-eye were a whole lot easier to pronounce, and I had them in my possession. So, um, I was offered them, but I just declined because I had my hands full as it was.
Yeah.
For anyone, Chris especially, is this a species that's kind of more difficult to raise? Like, I guess what I'm asking, they're all difficult, of course, but is this species like Zosterae, like a dwarf seahorse, like they have to have live foods and all of that, or?
Yeah, I've been told, like from Rochelle, she used to keep them at one point, and she said that the fry are big enough to take like just live Artemia from day one. But I'm still yet to see any babies and see how we go with that. So if that's the case, then that should be pretty good for raising them. But yeah, even adults, you're basically going to be feeding them on Artemia. She said that they do get big enough to take mysids, but I'm a little bit skeptical as to whether or how easy it will be to get them onto mysids, just due to the size of the mysids and the size of the seahorses that we have.
Sure.
I just don't see it.
Are they seasonal breeders or are they continual?
Hopefully continual. We'll still have to wait and find out. We did breed them years and years ago, but we ended up losing them all. And yeah, it'll be interesting, but we're basically starting over from scratch.
Well, and while I never advise anyone new to take a species that's, unique, different, or possibly hard to raise, we absolutely depend on people like you and people like Dan and Ray and et cetera to get these species in, figure out their needs, and then figure out how we can accommodate them, because you will. I have full faith that you will. So I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Aren't these guys look a little bit like Breviceps?
Yeah, they're basically very, very similar. It's just that yeah, I'm not even 100% sure what the differences are. We have had Breviceps in the past, but without a side-by-side comparison, I'd be very, very hard up to tell you what the difference is between them.
Well, the Breviceps are a cold water species, and these guys are not, correct?
Yeah, these ones are subtropical, so
that's probably the big difference there.
That's so interesting to me that you can have two seahorse species so similar in very different climate zone, or subtropical versus and have such different needs. Like, how does that happen? Just happen to be alike but different, or
Well,
what?
if you hang around long enough, you'll probably see the same thing with Erectus, another 100 to, I don't know, however many million years it takes.
Meaning what? Explain that a little further. I'm tad slow.
Well, the Erectus cover an area where they're in cold water and where they're in warm water, and I wouldn't be surprised to see at some point if there's a split, and become a distinct species.
Really? Huh. I mean, I guess that doesn't surprise me either, because I mean, even their breeding patterns with the Erectus are different between northern and
Yeah.
so how could the same seahorse have completely different gestation periods? That's kind of crazy. So I see your point. Um, this isn't the topic tonight, and I want to hear more of whatever you guys want to talk about. But just out of curiosity, what does define a species? Just when somebody decides to say these things are so different that it's a species, or what?
Well, I can't answer that question definitively. I know that they use DNA to look at them to help identify it, but exactly how they define what makes one species and one not a different species, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, Graham Short came on a couple of different times, and he explained it in depth. But apparently, it just a little bit over my head. I'm not sure, but it's still cool. I don't care what the real reasons are. I just think it's great, Chris, that you've gotten a hold of some, and if anybody can do this, you can. So amazing. I know you sent me some other pictures too. We probably can't talk about it here, but I just know that you're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm so excited to see all of this unfold.
You guys should be able to do well with that species if you get them going good.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, I've been trying to get some Breviceps to get them up and going, the same sort of deal. But I'm actually kind of more excited about these ones, although they are very hard to sort of pronounce, and they've got a tricky name. The fact that they're subtropical means that there should be a potentially a larger market for them
Yeah,
than just a tangerine.
my understanding is adults can't eat frozen mysis.
Really good.
Yeah. So yeah, like just the fact, like with the potbellies, they're our most popular species, but you always run into that problem that most people aren't willing to get chillers and that for them, and so a lot of people limit their own success. And Breviceps are basically like a dwarf seahorse that has much of the same requirements as a potbelly in terms of temperature. So there's not many people who fork out for a chiller, especially for like a nano tank or a very
Right.
small aquarium.
I just bought an air conditioner and put them, just walled them off and have a cheap $50 air conditioner I got off of Kijiji. And I keep it at 68. They do fine.
That's
There was a time where we used to sell Abdominalis and Breviceps, and people would put them in the same tank.
Really?
Yeah.
And they did well?
Yeah.
Okay, well, really quickly, not to interrupt the conversation, guys, but anybody in the audience who does watch this, if you want to see Ray's air conditioner unit type thing, he actually shared it in very many previous Wine Wednesdays. But hey, go through them. Pretty soon I'll have these cataloged with 20-minute kind of overviews of what the episode's about. But it is in there, so go check it out. And sorry about that. One thing I'm curious about too is, obviously we've already said that this species, pronounce it again, Chris.
not tuberculatus.
Tuberculatus, got it. Not tuberculosis, folks. Okay, no disease. Okay, so they're kind of like dwarfs, but they don't need the chiller type climate. They will need live feeds, but probably maybe not once you get them captive bred, and future generations may very well not. So my question is, if you get this species to a point of eating frozen foods, doesn't need a chiller, has basically the same needs as a typical seahorse species, my question then is, could they be kept in a smaller tank? I know, Dan, your answer for this typically, but Chris, what do you think? Could people keep them in a smaller aquarium because they're smaller, or?
I think so, as long as it's a stable environment, and as long as you can maintain the proper water quality, and sort of reduce fluctuations in temperature, I
Right.
think it should be potentially viable.
And that is really hard to do in a smaller aquarium. And Dan has spoken on this, and Ray has spoken on this many times. You see in the comments on the groups that most people that have kept seahorses for a long time advise you to get bigger, bigger, better. But everyone wants a seahorse they can keep in a 15-gallon tank, and the dwarf seahorses need the live food. So this sounds like a deal breaker, kind of. Or Dan, are we way
Well,
off? Go ahead.
well, the problem is that when you look at the long-term success, I look back at when people had the Capensas, when they had the Breviceps and what have you, and even the Breviceps with a chiller with the small tanks, they didn't have very long survival rates. Um, the problem is adequately filtering a small tank, and that's sometimes very difficult to do.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
would this, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
You're right. No,
Oh, okay.
you-
I was just foreseeing because a lot of people buy a 15-gallon tank and say, "Hey, I can do seahorses." I see these posts every day where someone
Sure.
says, "I got a 15-gallon tank. I want to do seahorses," and then everybody jumps in and says, "Well, you're out of luck because you can't." And I mean, they can't. You can't Hob filter 15-gallon tank very well for long-term success, as you were speaking. But could they not, at that point, if they have a pretty cylinder, weird-looking, really exquisite, beautiful tank that's only 15 gallons, then get a species like this and just add some huge sump with major filtration?
Well, if you add the sump into play and you have the proper filtration there, absolutely.
Okay,
But my contention is most of the people that buy the small tank um, typically don't have the sump, nor
sure.
are they willing to expend the money for the sump. So, it's it's unfortunate, but typically I see very few people with a smaller tank succeed long term with seahorses. And when I say long term, I'm talking about keeping the same seahorses for at least 18 months or longer.
Oh, wow, that's not even that long term. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
Well, it used to be considered long. It used to be people said they only lived for 2 or 3 years in captivity,
Right.
but we've since proven that way off.
I was going to say,
Um,
my
so,
guys are
and I'm
like
not going to tell you that you can't
old.
do it because you can. It can be done, but for the average newbie hobbyist coming in, they're going to have a difficult time keeping those guys going long term in a small tank.
Sure. And of course, there's always, as he, can't think of the right word, as he kind of alluded to, there are always ways. A lot of people do two very small tanks and just tank transfer. Kind of stressful on the seahorses, but there's always ways. But he's right. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
Well, the other thing to consider though is given the body mass and the amount of food that's going to be eaten and the waste production, you could have 3 pairs of those in a 30-gallon tank that would probably be equal to a pair of Erectus in a 30-gallon tank.
Wow. So there you go. The point is, you can have more. Ray's got to feed the dogs or the fish or something.
Gotta feed the fish, but I was just working on the ID guide and for this um, seahorse that you're raising, and all I see is Trimaculatus. Is that a different one?
yeah, that's a different species.
Well, I can't see the other one you're raising, not in the guide.
Well, the guide doesn't cover them all.
No.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I
it
get.
probably should be updated now anyway, since it's back to 2004.
I actually worked with a couple of gentlemen from the. Oh gosh, guys, now I'm gonna make a fool of myself and not remember the name. What's the main environmental seahorse protection type database for seahorses? Not Project Seahorse, but where do you go to find out their status? I can't think of the name of it.
You mean the CITES?
Yeah, no, the other one. CITES is the official overall, but the smaller one that actually. Oh, you know what? My comment has no.
It
Oh,
got
it's
me
gonna
lost.
kill me. Dan, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Where you look.
Anyway, I'll mute this while I'm going to fish.
Okay, sorry. You guys go ahead and keep discussing here because that's gonna drive me crazy now. Now I'm looking it up. I feel so terrible that I can't remember. But well, the point of the topic that I was going to say is they even talk about it's hard to keep up with the species and keeping track and etc. because to update that kind of information constantly is really hard. And you know, I keep saying I'm still working on the website, and I am, but I'm not a scientist either. So, anyways, Chris, what else you got to tell us?
Um, just been really busy with work lately. I finished a diving course over the weekend, so that was exciting.
Oh, I'm
I
so
got to do
jealous. Sorry.
some scuba diving, and it was awesome.
That is so great. So
So
you're certified now?
Yeah, I'm certified as an open water diver, so now I can hopefully do little trips and maybe go looking for some seahorses and sea dragons and try and swim with them in the wild. And yeah,
How cool. Now, I mean, that's cool by itself, but I'm curious, are there more steps that you'll have to take, like to actually collect yourself? Is that a different thing?
yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
I'm basically just getting into it recreationally at this point, and just observing things in their natural habitat and getting to see their natural behaviors.
Really amazing. And one more question about that. So if you were to get a tip that there were seahorses or dragons or whatever in a certain area, or handfish, anything in a certain area, now with your diving permissions, you would be able to go check them out, learn about them, watch them, and then if obviously I'm sure there are other steps, you have to talk to other people and such, but you could possibly send your collector to that point, or no?
Yeah, potentially,
That's
definitely.
awesome. Woo! Because I mean, frankly, I'm always for the environmental, save everything and whatever, but I think that's sometimes exaggerated. And I think if there's any chance for captive breeding to actually help in these environmental issues and in the sales and etc., it's going to be someone like you that knows what you're doing and actually collects to expand the population versus whatever. Okay, I'm done with my spiel. What else? What else you got going on, and anything else you want to talk about? Because we're just glad you came.
Yeah, working on revamping one of our display tanks at the moment. I've totally cleaned it and sterilized it and everything, and that's been keeping me super busy this week.
Mm.
So yeah, I should have a very exciting display it's up and running now, but I've got some very, very cool creatures coming tomorrow, which we will have on display, and really looking forward to it.
So a new display goes up tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of up now, but there's just nothing in it
Right,
right now.
right.
I've got some livestock coming tomorrow that I'm super excited about.
And is this within the seahorse, signathid, etc. world?
Signathid family, yes.
Ooh, you guys, my tingly senses are going off. I'm excited to see. Will you be sharing anything? Like any
Um,
video or anything?
Possibly.
I
I've just
guess
got
we
to,
all have to go to Australia and go see it.
yeah,
What?
you have to jump in and say hello.
Oh, I wish. I so wish. But I can't wait to see. I know it's going to be amazing. Um, I'm curious too, how long does it take you? Because I know, obviously you're talking about huge displays, not the same as a home aquarist, but how long does it take you? What's all involved? Or is it too complicated to talk about when you have to tear down and set up? Is it
Oh,
huge?
it's like it's a huge tank that we're talking about. It's probably, I don't know, it'd be more than 1,000, well over 1,000 gallons, all said and done. Um, but yeah, it was just a massive thing, just pulling apart everything and scrubbing everything clean and sterilizing everything,
Sure.
and yeah, lots
When
of
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. When you've talked before, I think you've been one of the people that has kind of laughed at like the bottle bacteria and stuff because you are a water change man. It's always worked. It still works. It works. But when you have to cycle a tank like that, is there any certain method that you use, or do you just watch parameters and use water changes?
Usually I like to get some established bacteria to set up a tank like this from scratch.
Gotcha.
When everything's been sterilized, when you have to sterilize the biomedia and everything that normally does all the biological work and filters the tank
Sure.
and breaks down the waste, you've basically got to start over from scratch like it's a brand new tank. And we're very fortunate to have some biologically established, uh, you know, stuff ready to go. So all I have to do is swap that into the tank and basically got a I guess filtered tank. I'll still have to watch the water parameters, and I'll still be doing basically daily water changes for the first possibly couple of weeks, maybe even 4 weeks, and yeah, I'll just have to keep watching it like a hawk, and yeah, wait till it's all set up, and I'm happy with it.
I mean, I think that's great, and I think that that's the natural, good way to do things. I know that Dan, you keep, like media really, really pre-cycled, correct? Same method, kind of, but
Well,
different.
what I used to do was I kept media that I kept cycled in a separate container. It was sterilized first, and then I would cycle it, and then I would just feed it pure ammonia and have it ready for starting up a system as needed.
Hmm.
And that way I could tear down a system, bleach it, and the next day have it up and running, fully cycled and ready to go.
Sure. Ray, I've kind of feel like I've neglected you. Do you cycle in any different way? I know it's been a minute since you set up a tank, but
Well, I use ammonia as well, except
hey, Ray, try to. Can you mute YouTube? I think it came unmuted or something.
I didn't unmute anything.
Okay, we're good now. I don't know what happened, but we're good. Go ahead.
It was me.
Okay, it was Dan. Dan's the bad boy.
Uh,
Go ahead,
How
Ray.
do
Anyway, for me, the last one that I set up was the barb tank here.
Mm-hmm.
And with that one, I used ammonia, but I set it up and put the seahorses in the same day.
Sure.
And I used the Chloramax and added Chloramax to it, and I kept on checking for ammonia. And if even a trace of ammonia showed, then it meant that I wasn't adding enough Chloramax often enough. So I just kept it on that keel, and then eventually it was fully cycled. It got longer and longer before I had to add any Chloramax, and
Hmm.
eventually it was done.
Now, I don't know the exact differences between Chloramax and, say, Prime. I use Chem Prime. I swear by it. I'm hearing an echo. I hope nobody else is. If anybody has YouTube, mute it. But anyhow, I think we have someone else in here before I go.
No,
no,
Oh, no,
that's
it's
me.
Dan. Okay. Well, Dan,
I was
we're
trying
what?
to give you a picture of the tuberculosis, or how do you pronounce it?
Tuberculitis.
Tuberculosis.
Thank you.
Tuberculosis. Thank you. Well, I want to go back to tuberculosis, but I wanted to say very quickly. Oh gosh, now I forgot what I was gonna darn say. I'm very curious about the differences between like Prime, Chem Prime, and Clearmax or Chloramax or whatever you use, because I use Prime in emergency situations. It's said to detoxify ammonia, turn it into ammonium, and keep the seahorses or fish safe. It's worked for me in multiple different situations, and I know that it does work. It'll save their lives. But I've always wondered, in a cycle situation, and I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just asking, I wonder if there's been any documentation or thought process on whether they're truly not being hurt. Like, I know with ammonium, it's not toxic to them, but I just can't imagine. To me, I guess I don't understand chemistry enough to understand how a different form of ammonia could just all of a sudden not hurt them, even like, you think of future effects or something. I don't know. I'm a
Well, the way I
pessimist.
got onto it was I had Prime available.
Mm-hmm.
This was many, many years ago. But when I was wanting to ship seahorses out west, um, I couldn't do it myself. The FedEx and all those companies, they wouldn't do it without you having a special account,
Okay.
and I couldn't afford that. So I wanted to prepare it here before it went to the store that was shipping for me, and um, I did some research and found out that the Asian markets that were shipping fish over here to North America were using Chloramax in the bags,
Hmm.
so that it was a couple days getting here, and then when people were acclimatizing things, then the pH would start going up, and the ammonia would become much more lethal. So they were putting this Chloromex in the bags to make sure that they weren't gonna have people complaining about losses.
So it's
Um,
really a different product than Prime. It has a lot more.
I think it's very similar, but I can't remember now. Like, I did
Sure.
the due diligence at that time, but especially when I had mild cognitive impairment now, there's no way I'm gonna remember from back that long ago. Uh, we're probably looking, that was around 2004 maybe, when I was looking at that.
Well, how amazing that you were doing that research, in 2004. I think that's so great. And your information that you have shared, you can't remember everything, but the information you do share is invaluable. And I'm going to look it up now. I'm going to research this because I'm curious the difference between
You
things
know,
like, go ahead, Dan.
the problem with it is this: the MQuel, or there's other products as well that will
Yeah,
detoxify the ammonia. Doesn't remove it. It changes the ionic form from one to another.
finds it, yeah.
It it works. The problem is that now your test kits are going to be off, because most test kits are going to be off once you put that in the water.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what
So
that's what
What
threw
I
me
normally
off.
work fine with it.
right. Well, the problem that
API.
happens to most people is that once they put that in the water, they can't truly find, they get false positive, false negatives,
Right.
and they run into problems afterwards because they can't keep track of what's happening.
But I think Ray was saying that with Chlormax, he did not. If he saw ammonia, he knew.
If you use the API test kit,
Oh, okay, okay. You had to use a good test kit.
there's another one too, but I can't remember the name now. I've always used API because it was the easiest one to get here.
Gotcha.
Well, I found that Amquel through the API is off.
Yeah,
Now,
Prime is also.
Chloromex may have been different.
Yeah.
Chloromex may be different, but um, it's the salicylic test kits that don't get thrown off, or the ones that aren't. I forget. It's been a long time, but
I know.
um, I resorted not to using that method. I resorted to water changes instead, because I wanted to be able to accurately test if I had ammonia or not.
Sure.
Now, interestingly, a lot of people make a big deal out of nitrites. I've had nitrites up to 5 parts per million, even with fry, that did just fine with it. But the ammonia, you get above a half milligram, and you're going to start losing them.
I'm curious too. I'm sorry, Chris. Don't if you need to go, feel free, or if you have something to talk about, feel free to interrupt us because we know your time. All of your times are valuable. Everyone's time is valuable, but we know you can't get here very often. So if you have something to share, please interrupt. Um, but Dan, how do you feel about nitrites? Because in my personal experience, because you've helped me, I'm one of those average Joes or Joannes, whatever you want to call me, that has always had issue with trying to cycle too fast, getting ammonia taken care of. Then I've got nitrites. I understood your comment about people are always worried about nitrates, and that's not as big of a deal as people think. You don't want them off the charts, but 2030 is not really hurting anything, just keeping organics low. But my question again is nitrites, how serious are they in the scope of ammonia and nitrates, in your opinion?
Well, in salt water, not near as bad as fresh water. Fresh water is entirely different, and they're much more toxic in fresh water than salt. And I've raised fry that went through 3 weeks of nitrites at 5 milligram at 5 parts per million, and did just fine. I don't find that a small amount of nitrites is the end of the world. It's stressful. It's not a good thing to do. I don't recommend it, but it's not like ammonia. You got 5 parts per million of ammonia, you have dead animals.
Really? Okay.
But, when I'm helping people cycle a tank, I get them all the way through that process to where they have zero ammonia and zero nitrites. Or, sometimes you can get a false reading on nitrites with some of these test kits where it's at the lowest level on there. But I don't freak out with nitrites like I do with ammonia.
Interesting. So there you go. Ammonia is absolutely the most important thing to make sure you've overcome. Go ahead, Dan or Ray.
That's the API kit that I have.
Yeah, I used to use those.
I have API, Salifert, and Red Sea, and somehow every single one of them gives me a different result. I don't,
Well, there was a non-published study that was done locally by the USDA, and this goes back about 15 years, maybe even 17 years ago.
mhm.
And they were looking to find a test kit they could use instead of their instruments to do some of the food fish studies. And they went and bought like a half dozen of each brand of test kits, and they tested them, and they found that every single one that was available in the market, including Salaferts, were not accurate enough for their needs.
Well, I mean, I can see that. We're talking about home hobbyists that are just, doing the best
I
we
know, but
can.
I'm
I
just
can
saying that if
imagine
you
that it
could
wouldn't
buy,
be good enough for a
well,
business.
they
Go ahead.
found even within the same brand, they found variances among the different test kits.
Well, because there's human error. In every single test kit, if you go this much above the line or if you drop, half of a drop that's not. In fact, when I got my first Red Sea test kit, this is really kind of embarrassing, but when I got my first Red Sea test kit, I couldn't figure it out at first, and I really believed. You know how you guys won't know. Anybody watching will know when you get a hair dye kit, you have to cut the tip, right, to get the hair dye, solution to come out. You have to cut the tip. And I thought I had to do that on the Red Sea test kit. So I was giving drops that were much larger than what was needed or would have worked for the test kit. So, anyways, I'm just saying it's human error. Even if the test kits actually are good, which is doubtful that they'd be sold at such a low price if they were that good. I don't know, but human error. So I believe that completely.
I've learned, in dealing with other people in the aquaculture industry, that your first rule is to go by observation of what you see going on in the tank. And if your test kit comes back and shows you something and everything looks fine, then you need to go back and double check. On the other hand, if the system is crashing and your test kit comes up positive for something bad, then it's most likely correct that it is reading something. Um, they're great as a general go by, but I see stuff on the forums all the time where Salafer's the most accurate. Well, I don't consider that accurate enough to go but to say that it's that much better than any other brand.
I actually use different test kits for different things, depending on their importance. Like, well, I won't go into detail, but I just do. If I'm testing phosphate, it might not be as important as testing for ammonia, per se. And I do have a saltwater reef too, so I test a lot of things that a normal seahorse keeper wouldn't test. I want to say very quickly before we move on, guys, that Chris, I did see that you had to go. Thank you so much for jumping in, and we're gonna dedicate a special day to you very soon, where we can ahead of time, get with me. We'll ahead of time plan and show some of the things that you want to share. I'm sorry that if I didn't give you enough time, I apologize. But we love having you in here, and we love learning what's going on. So, mwah, please come back. And go on. Were you saying something else, Dan? I didn't mean to interrupt. I just noticed you had to go. So.
No, I'm sorry to see it go.
I know. I feel like I overtalked. I'm so sorry, Chris. Come back. No, I'm kidding. But
If I got in here for a sec, I remember when you're talking about accuracy of test kits, I remember some years back discussions on Randy Holmes Farley's Reef Central page when he was Reef Central. And he went and took a whole pile of what do you call those packets you use for checking the refractometers?
I know what you mean. Go ahead, Dan.
Anyway, for to be able to calibrate the calibration packages, they'd come in a special calibration package, and you'd dissolve it, and then put a drop on your refractometer, and and adjust it. But Randy did test. He bought all the available hobbyist packages, the different brands that were available, and he tested them in his lab. And none of them were exact, and most of them were way off. And up to this time, like everybody's talking about how much better it is to use a refractometer for checking specific gravity. And here, I've never used a refractometer myself. I use for everyday use, I use the swing arms, and I shave the weight or I shave the float in order to make it match up with my hydrometers. I have Fisher Scientific certified calibrated hydrometers. And so
Whoa. Sorry.
I set up a fluid that's right at what I'm usually using it at 1.028. And once I have it at that and at the 65 degrees, then I'll check out with a swing arm and do a few tests with it to see if, first of all, make sure that it's consistent. And then once I know consistently that it's off by a certain amount, if it's too low, then I shave the weight that's on the swing arm just with the razor blade until it gets up to its range. And if it's higher than what it should be, then I shave a bit of the plastic off the float part.
I don't think anybody's going to do that, Ray.
So for me, it was better. I was much more accurate. I've had so many customers who are coming to me and getting me to calibrate their the refractometers with my fluids.
It's interesting. I
You
mean,
know,
go ahead.
what I have found in the past is that when I get a refractometer, if I spend the money and buy a good one, when I get it new, it's usually pretty accurate. And when I say pretty accurate, within, very, very, very close. And a little bit of adjustment with the, what do you call it? The,
Recalibration fluid.
Chris is
Yeah.
back. Go on.
hey,
I
Chris.
got
But I would find it to be very accurate. But what I would find is over time, they would become inaccurate. And there was two types of inaccuracies. One's linear, one's not. The linear ones, if it reads low, say by 5, 0.5 or 5 or whatever, it's across the scale. The other one was if we would adjust it to it was dead on at say 1026, you get to 1030 and it was way off. And what we finally deduced is that the handling of the device, if as it gets bumped around, it creates inaccuracies. And the problem today is a lot of this stuff is shipped around, and a lot of times people get them in, they don't double check them, and they can be, just from shipping, they can be knocked way off scale.
Sure. And I mean, the calibration itself is like very often over my head. Chris, I saw you came back and then you kind of muted for a second. We want to hear anything you've got to share. Please interrupt us. And as I said, we're taking yes votes to get you in here for a for an interview specifically on you. But did I cut you off at all and not let you share anything? Okay.
No. I actually got a phone call, which is why it cut out.
No worries. I know you're at work and gotta work and yeah.
So I'm gonna have to head back into work in a sec. I've just got a different new creature coming in for display, and I've got to go get it all sorted and ready. So
All right.
it's
Well,
always a bit of a juggling act, but yeah, it's good. It's exciting.
as soon
Lots of
as
new things happening.
I'm sorry. As soon as you are able to share your new display, please tag us on the any shares, and of course we want you to come back here and share any you can because we very much love what you're doing and can't wait to see the future. So
Chris, I'm glad you got some new stuff, and I hope you stay with it and continue to do what you're doing down there, man.
Cheers. Yeah, I'm trying my best. So hopefully we've got something to show for it soon, and yeah, should be really exciting getting some of these new projects off the ground.
I wish I got down to Australia and New Zealand and that to get around. It's the only place in the world I wanted to go. Never ever made it.
Well,
And
Well, it's never too late, Ray. You're always welcome down here.
Seahorses. Um, the very first seahorses that I bought that were not from here in Canada came from Australia. That was Nick Payne. You remember that name?
No, that
It,
doesn't ring a bell.
it was
Sorry.
before your time.
Well
But
before my time.
he had a company down there, but eventually he and his wife wanted to get off to do something else, and they were tired of I think, tired of the seahorse business, and they tried to sell it, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
But
well,
anyway,
we're just very glad that Chris is doing his thing at this point, and we love when he shares what he does have going on. I can tell just by the convo that Dan was hoping I'd shut up early enough that you guys could have our late night side convo, Chris. So I'll get with you on the side, and you obviously get to work, take care, and we're just so glad. I approve and support the head shaving. I really want to do it myself, but don't want to be cold. So I'll talk to you on the
It's very
side,
cold. Don't do it.
and we're gonna set up a day for that's just all about you and Seahorse Australia and Seahorse World.
Yeah, no,
So okay, you have a good day.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks for having me on, guys, and I shall catch up with you guys soon. If you want, message me, and yeah, have a good one, guys.
You already know I
Best
will.
to you, Chris.
Bye.
yeah,
All right. Okay, sorry guys. I love when
Yep.
he comes on. He's so amazing. Anyhow, and Dan, I'm sorry if I did cut you off in anything you wanted to chat with him about, but
No, you're fine.
okay. What
by the
else?
way, you never did show up with your snow shovel, you know.
I know. I got stuck in the snow, Ray.
Well, and now it's snowing again here now. It's supposed to snow for the next 3 days, so you can come again.
I'm stuck again. Literally, I'm not kidding you guys. Like, I almost didn't go to church tonight because it's so bad here. I don't know what happened. It was fine. I don't pay attention enough to the weather, I admit this. But I had no idea it was coming. My girls came home and said, do we have my girls are 13-year-old brats, and they're like, do we have this, and do we have bread and everything, peanut butter, and what I'm gonna need to feed my face for 2 days because they were sure we'd be snowed in, and it just keeps snowing. I can't believe it. It hasn't snowed in quite a while, so I don't know. Is it a cold front or something? I mean, what's going on? Why is it so
I don't know.
bad?
We're getting a cold front too.
Oh, shut up, Mr. Flip Flops. We don't want much love, but come on, man. I got snow. You got flip flops. No.
Well, if I get snowed in, I got lots to eat anyway. I made 26 pounds of sausage on the weekend.
Nice. I'm trying some cooking stuff. I don't share it very much online because, everybody shares food stuff. But, anyways, Dan, how cold is it there?
Supposed to get down to 54 tonight.
You poor thing. I think I'm at negative like 20. I have
And I
no
think
pity.
we're going to hit the 40s in the next couple of days at night.
So,
But,
what
You
exactly?
know,
Go ahead.
huh?
No, you go ahead. I was interrupting.
So I think we're going to hit. I don't know. I have to go back and look, but I think it's supposed to get upper 40s in the evenings, but it gets back up into the 60s in the daytime.
You poor thing. Let me tell you. I have no pity for you. That's just crazy. I can't even imagine. Does it ever get seriously cold in Florida? Ever?
Sure. 2012, I think it was. We had massive fish kills because the temperatures got down in the 30s and uncharacteristically stayed there for periods of time. Usually down here we get 2 or 3 days of cold and then it warms back up. But that year, every time we had a cold front come through, it would last for a week or two, and the waters here got much cooler than normal.
Sure.
Well, here when it gets to 32, we think, Jesus, summer's coming.
Right. I was gonna say 60s. That sounds
Well,
amazing
32
here.
is zero here.
Oh,
It's in centigrade.
yeah. You'll catch me up on the calculations all the time, but I'm just saying in general that the temperatures that Dan calls cold, I'm typically like, I'm good with that. that'd be fine as long as it's not
Well,
negative.
remember, I spent 14 years in New England, so I do know what cold is.
So you understand, you have the right to be warm now, I guess.
And it
Toasty.
was
I
funny
need
because
further
the
north,
the
man.
the first 2 years that I moved down here, it'd be 40 degrees and I'd still be in shorts and a t-shirt. Um, that has since changed down here. Most Floridians, once it gets below 60, it's time to put the socks on with the flip flops.
Oh, the horror. I I was actually gonna ask, like, when it does get cold, you said 2012 when it really got cold, but when it gets chilly, do the Floridians ever have sweaters and such, or what?
Oh, let me tell you something. It gets down in the 60s. You see people wearing parkers that people in Chicago would wear it below zero.
That's so
Um,
funny.
but I can tell you, I have been on the water here in Florida with it 32 degrees with 20-mile-an-hour winds, and
Oh,
I got to
sure.
tell you, that's pretty damn cold.
The wind matters. And I was just thinking, as you were saying that, honestly, that's kind of the thing with seahorses too. Seriously, or any ocean creature. When, as you were saying, in 2012, you had killed, had deaths and such because the cold extended. When you're in an area of the world and when you're in a situation where you're used to a certain temperature and that's what your immune system reacts to and whatever, all the science, and then it changes, if it just really quick changes, that's bad enough. But if it stays changed, that's really going to mess things up. So that kind of makes sense, why
Well,
those fluctuations drastic. Go ahead.
most Floridians, as much as we bitched about the cold,
Hmm.
because most people that come down here are trying to get away from the cold, um, we need some cold spells to keep certain animals in check.
Meaning, which ones?
Well, you get some of these invasive species like the iguanas and the snakes, the pythons or whatever the hell they are.
Mm.
Um, the cold weather helps keep them from spreading as
Oh,
much.
that's
Um,
interesting.
African bees.
yeah, that and the South American bees and the Chinese bees and all the rest of the damn bees.
You got all the bees. Okay.
But
Wow.
we've had a couple of unusually warm winters, and that's not good for the invasive species that we're dealing with.
It's so interesting the delicate balance that's going on in every situation, and one ecosystem balances on another. It's just fascinating. But
Well, globally, we're going to be looking at, it has over time things change, and um, according to NASA, we're coming up on a mini ice age,
hmm
and it'll be interesting to see what kind of changes occur because of that. Um, some of these things that are invasive will be knocked back in areas like this, but it's the biggest problem with the invasive species is humans. The humans are
right
the culprit of why we have invasive species.
now, wait. I just nodded my head and said right, but give me a little more details on that thought.
Well, you have, for example, the within the different hobbies, people bring in different species, and instead of disposing of them properly, they decide they don't want them anymore, so they turn them loose,
Okay.
or they escape, or you know, you know, there's also the shipping containers, the ships that have ballast that bring in water and dump the water. Um, then there's the um, cargo ships that bring in stuff from one place to another. They carry different types of varmints and reptiles and other things that come on board.
So they're
Right?
so wait, just so I'm following. First, you were talking about lionfish, like being released into the ocean in areas
Yep.
that they weren't before, surviving, breeding, and creating havoc. Then you were
Right.
talking about ships carrying, a rat from wherever to here, right?
Like
Or
Yep.
vice versa.
And the lizards. I mean, that we have all these Cuban lizards that have just overpopulated this area that have wiped out the chameleons,
Mm,
and most of those probably weren't pets that were released. They were probably, animals that when they were loading ships, some in another country just got on board the ship and
mm.
were brought here.
I was gonna
And
say everybody always blames the pet owners. Don't do that.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not always the pet owners, but some species, the lionfish in particular, the python in particular, they don't have a natural predator that keeps them in check. So they're
Right.
able to really explode in growth.
So sometimes the average person trying to do the right thing is messing things up further by releasing
Yep.
captive bred
And it's like
lionfish and
in
shit
local
stuff.
freshwater, you can now catch tilapia in freshwater, and tilapia is not a native species to Florida.
That's really creepy. And what you were just the what did you say is killing off the iguanas? What did you say was it? Cuban what?
The cold. No, the Cuban lizards are killing off the chameleons.
So does that like instinct? Do you instinctually think like that shipments from Cuba brought those? Because on some
I don't know specifically, but I do know that they believe that many of these lizards that we're dealing with are a result of container ships, not hobbyists.
could that be a situation? Could they fix that? Could they crack down on that? And
Trying to right now.
Yeah,
why?
damage is done.
Understood, but in the future, could they stop? Could they have better checks of the ships or something?
How do you? I mean,
I don't
I've
know. I
I've
just
driven to work before and seen the damn things on my damn hood of my car, and I drive to work and
mm-mm.
it's still on the hood of my car.
Wow.
Um, it's some of these things. How do you find how do you inspect a container ship that's 400 feet long with 500 containers on it and go inside every container, inspect every single one? There's no way that you're going to be able to do that.
And sadly, this entire conversation resembles too much immigration. So we're gonna steer clear. Ray, what were you gonna say? Were you gonna say something different topic or
No,
okay?
for me, I don't have land critters that much because I'm surrounded by the Great Lakes. I'm well aware of the ships that take on ballast to one place to come here to the Great Lakes, and they're going to pick up a load, so they discharge the ballast into the lakes, and then along with it comes uh, non-native fish and other critters. And we've got all sorts of invasive types now that are wiping out the natural habitat and the natural fish species. Um, and they don't seem to be able to do anything about it.
Ray, I think I heard you say, and that's a great point, that even just changing temperatures or situations in certain areas, I mean, the critters themselves, the animals, fish, whatever, themselves will move territories based on what they need and want out of, their lives or however you want to say it. They'll move and rehabitat make a population in an area that they weren't before, and that can create havoc with the other animals there. It's wow. I don't have an answer here. I'm really confused. I wanted to say really quickly, hi, Sir or Ma'am Cabral. Thank you for joining us. Talking about 42. Try 0, then come back and talk to me, okay? No 42 degrees matters anything here. I'm just teasing, but all right. Anything else? What else were you gonna say?
Well, I was going to say, Ray, if you ever come down to visit, just don't bring any of those damn polar bears down here.
Hey, we're losing them. It's
We
getting too warm for them, and they're not able to get across the ice packs to get their normal food supply of seals and so on. And so the population's dropping.
Now I know that what you're saying is accurate, Ray, and I know that climate change, and the effects are not fake. I think they might be a tad used for exaggerated purposes, but I don't think they're fake. I think there's a problem. But do you think that nature will fix itself? Do you think the polar bears will figure out a different way? Or am I? I'm just at. Oh, look at Ray Seahorse flipping and
I
flopping
think
in the background. Sorry, go.
we'll just have to live with whatever happens. But we do have to do something, or we're, like even my grandkids, I hate to think of what they're going to have to live through.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a firm believer that the climate is going to change both warm and cold, regardless of humans.
Yeah, but it's going to be faster now.
Well, that may be, but based on the sunspot activity, we're going to see cold weather becoming more cold here in the next few years. And um,
Mm.
where they're talking about global warming, now they're going to be talking about global cooling. And, you know, that's going to be an opportunity for some animals, such as polar bears, to, you know, beef up their population. But by the same token, there's going to be other animals that are going to suffer because of the cooling effect.
I'll
So
tell you, I'll be 77 this week. When I was a kid, my dad used to build ice rinks in our backyard, and we could get through just about every year. We could go from half of November or the end of November on a warm year through into the end of March and have that ice there. You'd have it. Some years you'd have some spells where you get getting a little waterlogged on the top of the surface of that until the next day when it would cool down again and refreeze. Now it's hard to keep ice for a week.
I don't know. My pool used to freeze. I don't almost say freeze solid, but my pool used to freeze over every year, and we used to be able to walk across the pool all winter long in Massachusetts, and that was fairly close to the shoreline, where it's warmer than further inland.
We don't get anywhere near the snow we used to get either.
well, let me ask you this though. Do you think that it's just nature and nature's way and we just don't get it? Or do you think that
Well, there's always like even before we got into the industrial age and started producing all these gases and chemicals and everything that started affecting things. There's still always there always has been for millions and billions of years. There's always been changes, but it's been so gradual. But now in the last 100 years, things have changed at quite a much faster rate now than they ever have before. And you're going to end up, like Dan says, there with the changes that happen, there are some species that are going to disappear, and the others that will become stronger. But you look along when you look at things like crocodiles, seahorses that have been around for so damn long, they've adjusted to whatever has happened in all those years. Are they going to be able to do it in the future? I don't know. The one thing you can be sure, the bacteria will survive.
the
The
back what?
bacteria are always going to be around.
What'd you say? The what?
Bacteria, they'll outlive anything.
I still didn't hear it. The back what?
Bacteria.
Oh, bacteria. Duh. Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of go back and forth. I just wonder if it's not like, of course, my personal beliefs, my personal beliefs may lend me to believing that there's an ultimate plan and that everything kind of happens for a reason and things adjust and we just don't get it. But I do understand your point of view and the science point of view that, you know, I think it's good that people try to limit any destruction we do to the world and anything we can do to save species. I just think they go too far. What were you going to say, Dan? I'm sorry.
Well, I wasn't going to. I didn't have anything particular at the moment, but I agree with what you're saying. Um, I question some of the old data because, you know, in today's world, the guy at work is always talking about we just hit another record high. Well, every day records are broken, both cold and heat. Recorded time in terms of actual recorded temperatures doesn't go back that far. You look back at the Middle Ages when they had all the heat, and then the mini
Back in
ice
the
age.
1800s,
You know,
in factual stuff, the rest of it's scientifically determined from looking at things that the glaciers have left, like the mountains and that. They can check things like that, and I don't know how they do it, but they are able to determine what temperatures were at those times, and so they do have proof that way. But as far as actual temperatures go, uh, from the 1800s on, there's a pretty good documentation on that.
Right, but that's just a blip. That's my point. Is that, you know, from 1800s to now, is 200 years, and how long has this planet been around?
Hey, time out, guys. Bottom line is look at the facts that we thought were true about seahorses 20 years ago that we now know are not correct. And the changes that have been made and etc. I just think sometimes we see, you know, the scientific data. I have so much respect for science, and I actually follow many of these scientists in their work, and I just see that often, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I like scientific data. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
but my problem with so many of these people that work on climate is they rely on previous studies as
Right.
being absolute and taking that data and assuming that it's correct to make their stuff correct. And what I'd rather see is people do independent studies that don't try to, you know, build upon previous studies, instead challenge previous studies and come up with answers, because then we get a true picture. Right now everything is so politicized that, you know, they take a, it's just like we've seen with seahorses, where this study says seahorses mate for life, so the next study says they mate for life, and they take that assumption
Right.
when in fact that's not true.
For
um,
all species, it is for one or
right,
two. But go on.
so, you know, if they did the same, if the climate studies were done in such a way where they were independent and not relying on previous studies, I would have much more faith in what they're doing.
And none of us are scientists. Anyone watching, we're just having a discussion. You're more than welcome to join in. We'd love to hear your opinions, and hopefully, we'll soon get Wine Wednesday in order, where we can start on time and get some scientists back in here, like Graham and etc., to debate this topic, because I think it's an important one. And I don't mean it always to go this deep, but it's kind of on the minds of all of us, I think. And while we're always here for your seahorse questions or comments, you know, it just goes there. Ray, what were you going to say?
I'm just gonna say I'm gonna pack it in and go sit in my lazy boy. My spine's just about had it.
Mine too. I think
This
it's the
area
weather.
is not very good for when you have a spine disease.
I don't have the disease, so I apologize, because yours, I'm sure, is much worse. Actually, I do have something going on, but it's not as bad as yours, I'm sure. So, but either way, I think we are going to call it for the night. Thank you to everybody that came, Chris especially. Yes, I said especially. You boys are my regulars. Just kidding. I appreciate all of you that come and everybody in the audience. If you have questions and we're not live, of course, just go to Seahorse Whisperer Society or even Seahorse Sources group and post your questions and tag Seahorse Whisperer Society, and we will be sure to discuss them on the channel in the live stream. And I will let the boys say goodbye, and then I'll give you my cheers. Go ahead, boys.
Hey, good night.
Dan, say goodbye. He's not going to say goodbye. Okay, fine. All right.
Okay.
All
Night
right.
all.
Good night, everyone. See you next Wine Wednesday. Cheers. Ah, find that end button. All right.